Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
These folks at ESPN, it's almost like they all get the same marching order. They all get the same bullet points here. This is what we're going to say. And they proceed to say it. Is it coming from the top? No. Is it coming from the bottom? No. Is it coming from a certain somebody who calls NBA games occasionally, a certain somebody who calls women's college basketball tournament games occasionally, a certain somebody who will see on the sideline 1 p.m. in Indiana? I think so. The message is just too consistent. And the chain is just too clear. We have Stephanie White saying one thing. We have Carolyn Peck going on ESPN regurgitating that one thing. Then we have a new stooge on ESPN regurgitating what Carolyn Peck said. And it all trails back to a certain somebody that we see on the sideline of Indiana Fever.
Yo, pause. Did you just hear what she said? Did you catch that with your own two eyes and your own two ears? Because I had to rewind that clip 3 times to make absolutely sure I was not losing my mind. Welcome back to Street Hoops, people. I'm your host, Dre Fiver. And today, we are not playing around. We are not sugarcoating a single syllable. Because what just aired on ESPN, what just came flying out of Laurencia Moten's mouth on national television, is either the boldest, most misguided basketball take of the entire year, or it is the latest chapter in one of the most coordinated, most transparent, most embarrassing anti-Caitlin Clark media campaigns this sport has ever seen. And I, for one, am completely done pretending I don't see exactly what's going on here. So let's get into it. Let's really get into it. During a recent segment on wnba on ESPN, analyst Laurencia Moten stepped up to the microphone, puffed her chest out, and declared her so-called hot take for the world to hear. Her claim? That the Indiana Fever played some of their best team basketball without Caitlin Clark in the lineup, and that with Clark on the floor, the offense was, and I'm quoting her directly here, extremely easy to guard. She went on to say that Clark is like the sun the offense orbits around, that the ball is constantly in her hands, and that once Clark went down with injury in 2025, the offense somehow became more diverse, more dangerous, and harder to stop. Kelsey Mitchell flourished. Lexi Hull stepped up. Aaliyah Boston had a dominant year. And according to Moten, all of that happened because Caitlin Clark wasn't there. Now I want you to sit with that. I want you to really let it marinate because this is not a minor claim. This is not some harmless debate show hyperbole. This is an ESPN analyst on a major platform telling the viewing public that one of the most gifted offensive forces this league has ever seen is actually a liability to her own team. That the Indiana Fever, a franchise that was losing games by 30 points before Clark arrived, somehow functions at a higher level when their superstar is sidelined on crutches. That is the take. That is what we're being served on national television in 2026. And the numbers, the cold, hard, undeniable numbers, say something completely different. But here's what I really need you to understand before we go any further. This did not start with Laurencia Moten, not even close. This narrative has a family tree, and once you trace it back to the roots, the whole thing becomes crystal clear. Back in July of 2025, ESPN analyst Carolyn Peck went on SportsCenter and told the world, and again, these are her actual words, that Indiana is even more dangerous when Caitlin Clark doesn't play. She called Clark a ball-dominant guard, said the ball is in her hands a lot, so you know what you need to take away, and then shifted to crediting Kelsey Mitchell, Ari McDonald, and Aaliyah Boston as the real weapons. Sound familiar? Because it should. That is almost word for word what Laurencia Moten just said nearly a year later. Same argument, same framing, same conclusion, different face, same script. Now here's where this story gets really interesting, and honestly, kind of wild when you think about it. Carolyn Peck and Stephanie White are not strangers. These two women have a relationship that goes back decades. Peck was the head coach at Purdue University during White's junior and senior seasons, and together they led the Boilermakers to the 1999 NCAA National Championship. They won a title together. Peck was White's coach. White was Peck's star player, and when White later became the head coach at Vanderbilt, she brought Peck onto her coaching staff as an associate head coach, pulling her away from ESPN to work by her side. So when Carolyn Peck goes on television and starts talking about how the Fever function better without their point guard, you have to ask yourself, is she speaking as an objective ESPN analyst? Or is she speaking as someone with a 25-year personal relationship with the head coach of the Indiana Fever? Because those are two very different things, and the audience deserves to know which one it is. Andre's personal opinion? It ain't objectivity. It never was. When your former player and lifelong friend is coaching a team and their star player is getting all the attention, all the glory, and all the credit, and that player missed most of the season with injuries while the rest of the squad held things together, it is very, very easy to go on TV and spin that narrative in a way that uplifts the coach's system and diminishes the player's importance. That's not journalism. That's loyalty. And there's nothing wrong with loyalty in real life. But when you're sitting in an ESPN broadcast chair being presented to millions of viewers as an impartial analyst, you owe those viewers the truth. Now let's talk about the facts, because that's what separates this channel from the noise. Anyone can have an opinion. Anyone can sit in front of a camera and say whatever sounds good. But the numbers do not lie, and the numbers here tell a story that completely dismantles everything Moten and Peck have been peddling. In the 2025 WNBA season, Caitlin Clark appeared in just 13 games due to a brutal string of injuries, a left quad strain, a left groin strain, and then a right groin injury that ultimately ended her season entirely. 13 games. And in those 13 games, Indiana went 8-5. Without her, over the course of the full season, they finished 16-15 in the regular season. 8-5 with your star, 16-15 without her. You want to tell me again how the team is better without Caitlin Clark? And it goes deeper than wins and losses. With Clark in the lineup, the Fever's net rating, which measures how many points a team outscores opponents per 100 possessions, sat at a very healthy plus 6.4. Without her, that number dropped all the way down to negative 0.3. That is a swing of nearly 7 points per 100 possessions. In basketball, that is enormous. That is the difference between a championship-caliber team and a team that's fighting to stay above 500. The offensive rating with Clark was good enough to rank among the top 3 in the entire league. Without her, Indiana fell to essentially league average, despite Kelsey Mitchell going on a tear, despite Ari McDonald playing inspired ball, despite Aaliyah Boston doing everything asked of her. The individual heroics were real. The idea that the team was structurally better, completely manufactured. And here's the part that really gets me. Here's the thing that nobody in the mainstream media wants to say out loud. When Carolyn Peck made her more dangerous without Clark declaration in July of 2025, Indiana was riding a 2-game winning streak against a Lynx team and a depleted Aces squad. She was essentially using a 2-game hot streak against weakened opposition to make a sweeping claim about the architecture of a franchise. And then, almost immediately after those comments went viral, the Fever went out and lost to a Los Angeles Sparks team that was sitting at 5 wins and 13 losses on the season. 5-13, one of the worst records in the entire league, and Peck had just told the world that Indiana was more dangerous without Clark. You cannot make this stuff up. Now let's talk about Laurencia Moten specifically, because I think it's important that the audience understands who is being presented as an authority on this subject. Moten is being put in front of millions of viewers on ESPN as a credible basketball analyst. And look, I have nothing personal against her. She seems like a sharp person. She's a good communicator, and clearly ESPN sees something in her. But if you are going to go on national television and tell the world that Caitlin Clark's offensive style makes a team extremely easy to guard, then your basketball credentials need to be able to hold up to scrutiny. According to her college basketball record at Hartford, Moten averaged 3.4 points per game over her career, shooting 34% from the floor. 3.4 points. 34% shooting. At Hartford, not at UConn, not at Tennessee. Hartford. And that career was split across multiple schools and cut short by injury, so we're talking about a very limited sample of play at a very modest level of competition. Now I want to be careful here, because playing college ball, any college ball, is an achievement, and not playing at a high level does not automatically disqualify you from being a good analyst. Some of the best minds in basketball never played professionally. But here's the thing, if you average 3.5 points per game at a mid-major program, you probably should not be the person on ESPN telling the world that the greatest offensive point guard the WNBA has seen in a generation makes her team predictable and easy to defend. At some point, you need the receipts to back up the audacity, and the receipts just are not there. And here's what I personally find most insulting about the whole narrative. Not just Moten's take, but the entire thread of this argument that ESPN keeps recycling. The whole premise is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what Caitlin Clark actually does for a basketball team. The argument goes, Clark has the ball too much. Defenses can key on her, so it makes the offense predictable. But that is exactly backwards from how basketball actually works at an elite level. Yes, Clark is ball dominant. Yes, defenses game plan specifically for her, but that is not a weakness. That is a weapon. When a defense commits extra resources to stopping one player, that creates advantages for every other player on the floor. Clark's gravity, the way she commands attention from the moment she crosses half court, is precisely what creates the open looks that Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hull, and Aaliyah Boston were cashing in on throughout the season. The idea that removing her somehow makes those opportunities better is like saying you should take the magnet out of the equation because too many things were being attracted to it. Dre's take, the Fever got hot during a 2-week stretch in the summer of 2025 without Clark against a favorable schedule because Kelsey Mitchell went absolutely nuclear and Aaliyah Boston was dominant in the post. That is the real story. Kelsey Mitchell is an elite scorer. Full stop. She is one of the most dangerous guards in this league, and she can absolutely put a team on her back for stretches. What happened was not evidence that Clark holds the team back. What happened was evidence that the Fever have secondary stars capable of carrying short stretches when the primary star is unavailable. That is called depth. That is called roster construction. That is not proof that your franchise player is expendable. Now let's circle back to the connection between all of these voices, because I think once you lay it out clearly, the picture speaks for itself. Carolyn Peck coached Stephanie White at Purdue. They won a national championship together. Peck later served on White's coaching staff at Vanderbilt. They have called each other close friends publicly and repeatedly over the years. When White came back to take over the Indiana Fever ahead of the 2025 season, Peck was back in the ESPN chair. And throughout 2025, the season where Clark missed 31 of the team's regular season games, Peck's commentary on ESPN consistently pushed the narrative that the Fever's success without Clark was a reflection of White's coaching genius and the team's depth rather than an asterisk-worthy stretch carried by a favorable schedule, and Kelsey Mitchell being on fire. That is not a coincidence. That is what happens when personal relationships and professional platforms mix, without proper disclosure to the audience. And now, heading into 2026, with Clark healthy and the Fever entering the season as genuine title contenders, ESPN hires Laurencia Moten, who by her own admission looked up to Carolyn Peck. And what does Moten immediately do? She goes on air and drops the exact same talking point Peck was spreading 10 months ago. Same structure, same comparison to ball-dominant guards affecting offensive predictability. Same conclusion. Same supporting cast of names. Mitchell, Boston, Hull. Offered as evidence that Clark's absence was somehow liberating. The chain of influence here is not subtle. It is direct. It is documented. And it should concern every single person who tunes into ESPN expecting honest basketball analysis. And let's not forget the ratings conversation, because money does not lie, even when analysts do. According to multiple sports media reports from the 2025 season, viewership for Indiana Fever games dropped by an average of 39% in Clark's absence compared to her most recent active appearances. 39%. When she was healthy and playing, Fever games on CBS drew nearly 2 million viewers, one of the most watched WNBA games in the history of that network. The moment she went down, the numbers fell off a cliff. The league's television partners know this. The advertisers know this. Caitlin Clark is not just the best player on the Indiana Fever. She is the single biggest draw women's basketball has produced in the modern era. And the idea that the same player, whose presence puts nearly 2 million people in front of their televisions, somehow makes her team easier to guard and less dangerous, is not a basketball argument. It is a personal one. And the internet, as it always does, fired back immediately and without mercy. Fans pulled out the receipts within hours of Moten's segment airing. The data showed, clearly, visually, undeniably, that Indiana's win percentage was better with Clark. Points per game higher with Clark. Offensive rating superior with Clark. Effective field goal percentage better with Clark. Assist rate higher with Clark. Defensive rebounding better with Clark. Overall rebounding better with Clark. Turnover ratio better with Clark. And the plus-minus better with Clark. Across virtually every meaningful statistical category, the Fever were a demonstrably more effective basketball team when number 22 was in the lineup. One fan pointed out that in Clark's 13 games during 2025, Indiana averaged 87.8 points per game and went 8-5. In 31 games without her, they averaged 83.7 points and went 16-15. That's 4 fewer points per game and a dramatically worse winning percentage, once you strip away the schedule strength smoke and mirrors. Another fan noted something that I think is genuinely devastating to the easier-to-guard argument. Clark actually led the Fever in assists even while playing a fraction of the season. Her gravity and playmaking created the offensive structure that everybody else fed off of. The notion that Boston, Mitchell, and Hull succeeded despite Clark rather than because of the spacing and attention Clark commanded is frankly an insult to how basketball works. Every open shot Kelsey Mitchell ever got while Caitlin Clark was on the floor existed because a defense was cheating toward Clark. That's not a knock on Mitchell. That's just basketball physics. Now look, I want to be fair here because fairness matters on this channel. There is a genuine conversation to be had about ball dominance and offensive system design. High-usage point guards do create predictability in some respects. There are legitimate coaching adjustments that opponents can make when one player handles the ball as frequently as Clark does. That is a real basketball concept, and it deserves a real basketball discussion. But that discussion requires context, requires nuance, and most importantly, requires honesty about the data. What it does not look like is going on ESPN in the lead-up to a new season, with Clark fully healthy and coming off her most statistically efficient stretch of professional ball, and declaring as a hot take that the team was better without her. That is not nuanced analysis. That is narrative planting. And given everything we know about the relationships involved, and the consistent coordinated nature of this message across multiple ESPN voices, it smells less like journalism and more like a press operation. Dre's final opinion? I think Caitlin Clark's return in 2026 scares a lot of people in this league and in this media ecosystem. I think a fully healthy Clark, who averaged 16.5 points and nearly 9 assists per game while playing hurt and limited, is going to make this entire conversation look ridiculous by August. I think Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, and the rest of that Fever roster are about to benefit enormously from playing alongside a healthy Clark, just as the statistics from every game she's ever played have suggested they would. And I think ESPN has some serious questions to answer about why the same talking point, delivered by people with documented personal connections to the Indiana Fever's head coach, keeps cycling through their airwaves as though it's independent analysis. The message is too consistent. The chain of relationships is too clear. Stephanie White tells Carolyn Peck how she sees Clark's role in the offense. Peck goes on ESPN and spreads it. Moten picks it up from Peck and spreads it again. Same words, same logic, same conclusion. Different faces. And every single time, the numbers come out and prove the take wrong. Every single time. Caitlin Clark is back. Healthy. Motivated. Representing the United States in the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament this offseason and looking every bit the transcendent talent she has always been. The debates are about to be settled on the floor, where they always should have been settled. And when Clark is dropping dimes, pulling up from the logo and making Indiana's offense hum at an elite level, while the entire sports world watches, I want everybody to pull up these clips. I want everybody to remember exactly what ESPN put on television. I want you to remember Carolyn Peck saying more dangerous without her. I want you to remember Laurencia Moten calling the offense with Clark extremely easy to guard, because the tape doesn't forget. The stats don't forget. And Street Hoops absolutely does not forget. That is the show today, people. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Smash that like button right now. Leave a comment below telling me what you think about this entire ESPN narrative and whether you believe this is coordinated or just a massive coincidence. And subscribe to Street Hoops for more no-filter, no-agenda, facts-first basketball coverage. We don't have any loyalty to anybody's front office. We don't have any championship rings to protect. We just have the truth, the tape, and the numbers. And today, all three of them point in exactly the same direction. I'm Dre Fiver. Street Hoops. We out.